I'm going to talk about the interesting shifts that are being made in the European Union now that Viktor Orban's out of office, and he is out of office. I remember saying that in the lead up to the Hungarian election, the question was not whether or not Viktor Orban was going to lose. He is going to lose. The question is whether or not he's going to lose decisively enough, and there's going to be enough public opposition to him staying in office that he isn't going to try anything different. Now, thankfully, either due to the strength of Hungarian institutions, the strength of their civil society, just due to how overwhelming the result was, and he just read the temperature in the room. He can function as a basic political thermometer. That he decided wasn't worth it. He's going to get out of there. And not only is he going to get out of there, and he's no longer the leader of Hungary, but he's also leaving the leadership of Fidesz. Now, if he's going to be going to the United States to go on a podcast tour, like I said years ago, I think at least like a year and a half ago or something, I don't know. I still think that is at least 50-50, that he's going to be doing the podcast tour, and that's where he goes from here. But Orban's gone. His foreign minister being an informant for the Russian government in EU meetings is done. Their delay of financial and military aid to Ukraine and them holding it hostage to try to get funds for Hungary released. And even when they do get it released, they continue doing it next time some aid comes up anyway. That is done. We have new leadership, and that new leadership isn't taking a position on Ukraine that is yay Zelensky, batko national. Like, no, that's not happening. But they're not going to block aid anymore. And that was the main problem that the Hungarian government of Viktor Orban posed towards the Ukrainians, was the blocking of their immediate needed lifeline for Ukraine to maintain its sovereignty as an independent state, which was not a priority of Viktor Orban at all. He was perfectly willing for the Russians to invade X, Y, or Z country as long as he got to keep his energy from the Russians. He could sell it to his buddies, get them a lot of money, benefit his hold on power, and it's not clashing with his calcified interests, the oligarchy that he has established. Now, thankfully, he's on the way out. Tons of his colleagues are fleeing Hungary like crazy, trying to get all of their stolen money out, and he's gone. And the new government isn't going to block aid. They're not going to likely send any aid, as the new government did say that they're not going to send aid due to the difficult economic position that Hungary is in. I always thought that cheap Russian energy was bringing them to the new age of economic flourishing, but apparently not. Apparently, Hungary is actually in quite a difficult economic position, that the constant promises of handouts by the last administration in order to keep winning elections actually did have an impact on the bottom dollar, the bottom line of the government, and now they have to administer it with some responsibility and bookkeeping, despite promises that might have been made by the opposition on the campaign trail. So Viktor Orban's out, the blocking of aid is gone, and the inside informant for the Russians is gone. What does this mean? Well, number one, obviously it means Hungary will not be a problem for the Ukrainians when it comes to getting aid to them. It also means that the EU accession process can proceed. It doesn't mean that Ukraine's going to immediately become an EU member state, but it means that that process can continue, both for Ukraine and for, I believe, Moldova. There's a bunch of countries that can now move forward in the EU accession process, which Viktor Orban was holding up for the Hungarians. So that's a positive. Another positive is now that Orban's gone, there's no longer a big bad. What I mean by that is within the European Union, Viktor Orban was disliked for a lot of reasons. He was disliked because he undermined Europe's security priorities. He was disliked from his own personal ideology and the way that he didn't really believe in, didn't really believe in migrant rights in the same way everybody else does. Put him in a shipping container and that's basically it. He was also disliked due to him being horribly corrupt and using EU funds in order to engage in that corruption, leading a country that was ranked the most corrupt 4 years in a row after he led the country into that situation. There was also, of course, the child abuse scandals, but point is, they didn't like Viktor Orban, and so their rage at blocking support for Ukraine, their rage at his undermining of Brussels, that isn't focused on Budapest anymore. Meaning that if somebody else wants to pick up that flag, if somebody else wants to perform that role, the focus could shift to them. And one high leading suspect for this role was Fico. For those of you who don't know, after the Law and Justice Party in Poland lost power, and then a different party came in, they were not able to do the EU power balancing where they would balance off of each other when they would get cornered for violations of EU regulations or otherwise. Once the Law and Justice Party had left, Viktor Orban didn't have anybody to balance off of until Fico of the Slovakia, he stepped in and he became that balancing partner. But he became the junior balancing partner because Slovakia is, well, I don't want to be mean to Slovakia, but Slovakia does not have the same economic or geopolitical weight as, say, a Germany, a France, a United Kingdom, or a Poland. And you need to start talking about Poland in this context of European heavyweights. When you look at their economic growth, when you look at their military growth and their military spending, when you look at the development, they need to be talked about in this context. But they didn't have that balancing partner. They had Fico. And so when Fico lost Viktor Orban, my first thought was on who could perform this role to sabotage Ukraine going forward. As I said, him. I said the Slovaks. He had a record of supporting Hungary in his endeavors to do so. He has a record of pretty bad quotes when it comes to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And he is somebody who has been, quote unquote, slick before. So I thought that he was a leading suspect. I ultimately said I didn't think he would because I think he would box himself in. I don't think he has the same weight. I don't think he, quite frankly, cares about it to the same extent that Viktor Orban cared about it, or that he bets his political success off of it the same way that Viktor Orban bet his political success off of it. And now Zelensky has had a meeting with the Prime Minister of Slovakia. He had this meeting in Yerevan at the European Political Community in Armenia. And during this discussion, they seemed to coordinate in a pretty cordial way.
The situation, so
See him here?
this meeting, that our time is limited, so I would like to concentrate on main
So they're chatting, and you can read the message that Zelensky attached to it. I met with the Prime Minister of Slovakia. Ukraine is open to constructive dialogue with Slovakia and is interested in developing strong relations. We discussed cooperation across various areas and holding a governmental meeting in the format of an intergovernmental commission in the near future. We spoke about exchanging visits to Kiev and Bratislava, which is the Yugoslav capital. Oh, Freudian slip. Slovak capital, and agreed that our teams will work out the schedule. We also addressed Ukraine's EU membership. Importantly, Slovakia supports Ukraine's accession to the European Union. That's a good development to hear, and is ready to assist us on that path. I am grateful for that. Then he posts the same thing in Ukrainian for the Ukrainians that follow his main account. Okay, so number one, what does this mean? It means that Slovakia is not going to be blocking the aid packages. Before, Viktor Orban was the main one blocking the aid packages, and Fico would be in the background making arguments in favor of it, essentially. So Orban would take the heat, Fico would provide the cover, right? That at least seemed to be the dynamic that had established. Now, he can't take the heat on his own. I mean, he could barely provide the cover, but he certainly cannot take the heat. So I think one of it is he just does not want to get in trouble with the European Union and have Slovakia's EU funds ever brought into question, or have, Slovakia put under the diplomatic microscope in the same way that Viktor Orban did. But Viktor Orban bases his political success in that. if it becomes the main issue of the upcoming Slovak elections, like, oh yeah, our prime minister is like the main opponent of the European Union. Oh yeah, our prime minister is the reason Ukraine isn't getting support. Oh yeah, our prime minister is making it so that our EU funds are now being brought into question. He didn't want that. He didn't want that back then, but Orban was there to provide him cover, and he certainly doesn't want it now. So I don't think that we're going to see a big aid package from the Slovak prime minister in the near future. I don't think we're going to see him going out there saying, Slava Ukraini, here I'm Slava, occupation everywhere is a crime. The Russian occupation of Crimea was a crime, XYZ. I don't think we're going to see him going out and doing that. But I do think we're going to see him supporting Ukraine's membership to the European Union, meaning he will not be a block of that. After the Hungarians moved their position upon their new government coming to power, they stopped blocking the European aid package of $105 billion to the Ukrainians, $39 billion of which they will, I think 33.9 actually, $33.9 billion of which they will actually see during this year. I don't think that since the Slovaks aren't going out there and making noise, the Slovaks aren't blocking that aid package, and the Slovaks don't seem to be sticking out their neck. In fact, the only thing we've heard now is that they support Ukraine's EU accession. I think we can rule the Slovaks as no longer being a hurdle for support to Ukraine. I think that if you're questioning whether or not this guy is going to use Slovakia's artillery stockpiles, Slovakia's armored vehicle stockpiles, whether they're going to start sending Ukraine some MRAPs, I put that on the back burner. I find that to be less likely. But I do think that he doesn't want it to be a campaign issue. He doesn't want to face the heat for the rest of the European Union. And he'd rather, to be frank, would not deal with it. He understands that this is an isolated position and that it certainly wasn't enough to help Orban. Why would it be enough to help him, especially when it comes with such risks? So I would say that Fico, his presence as an anti-Ukraine hurdle is probably gone for the immediate future. Whether that will come back around post his election, whether that will come back around more likely if somebody else gets into a position, like if Babiš like completely took over Czech politics and he made that a priority for himself, or if there was a different political development, then maybe, but now, nah, he has to take a step back and concentrate on his own political survivability. Now, that's just one. Here's another interesting meeting that has taken place. I really do think that the Orban election results might have been the start of something that is a sea change in Ukraine's relationship with certain countries, as they see, wow, looks like Zelensky outlasted Orban. Looks like the Ukrainians are still here. Looks like the Ukrainians are still fighting. Looks like there's no 24-hour peace deal. And looks like the main opponent of Ukraine in the European Union is now gone. Well, maybe we should reevaluate our position on the Ukrainians as they continue to not back off of their EU position on ascending or wanting to be a member of NATO. Here is the Georgian Prime Minister. Mind you, this is the Georgian Prime Minister meeting with Zelensky on the outskirts of Yerevan, the European meeting that was happening there, as he goes back and forth with the Georgian leader, talking about a number of issues. This I have not seen before. There has been no Zelensky meeting to Georgia while Dream has been in power, considering Dream's very friendly relationship with the Russians. And there has been no meeting between the Georgian Dream Party and Ukraine. They have no interest in doing that. Georgians support Ukraine by and large, but the Dream Party has a cordial relationship from Russia, not only due to oligarchic ties, which of course exist, but also due to what they think is a question of practicality, where they don't think they can basically stare down the Russians, so they accept it. They basically accept it. That's alongside the fact that the Georgian Dream Party has been flirting with Russian-type laws surrounding NGOs and, the future of the country. But I do believe Georgian civil society is much stronger than some might believe. I want to show this meeting, though, because this meeting is interesting considering the different camps these people come from. The Georgian Prime Minister said he always carefully chooses his words to Zelensky, since he is the president of a friendly and warring country. Kozabatsky called the conversation, sorry about my terrible pronunciation, friendly and interesting, and expressed readiness for maximum restorations of relation with Ukraine. At the same time, they admitted that the accumulated problems in bilateral relations, including the recall of the ambassador and sanctions by Ukraine against Georgian officials, have not gone away. So basically, Ukraine has been very critical of the Dream Party, very critical for them for what they think is passing Russia-style laws. They've even gone so far to sanction certain Dream Party officials, not only due to these stances they have taken on laws, but also due to their very close proximity to the Russians and the fact that the Georgian Dream Party was taking decisions that directly derails Georgia's pathway to European Union membership, which could be a function of they want to derail the membership, but they simply cannot directly say we do not want to be a member. I don't think Russia wants them to be a member. And as we know, the Dream Party and the Russians, pretty close. So, what do I make of all this? What do I make of all these meetings? Number one, I would say that the meeting in Yerevan was probably successful, that the Ukrainians were able to get themselves in a lot of rooms. They were able to put forward their mission. They were able to put forward their values. They were able to basically describe why they're fighting, what they're fighting for, and make their diplomatic pitches to these governments in question. So I would say, number one, the environment was good for it. And if you look at the leader of Armenia's social media accounts, his Instagram is farming impressions. He is posting a video of him shaking the hand of every single leader. He is farming impressions. So I would also say, obviously, a success for Armenia. Now, the other reason, though, is the change in dynamics. With Orban gone, before the question was, how can Ukraine sustain itself with a shaky foundation in Europe, with a man throwing logs into the gears constantly, and a shaky foundation in the United States, especially post-Trump. Now, the midterms are coming around in the United States. The political future of the United States marches forward. And when it comes to Europe, Viktor Orban, Ukraine's main opponent, is gone. The aid package of $105 billion has been approved, and the billions of dollars should be dispersed in the near future. Not all of it, but a large portion of it. A large portion of it. So, I think that while the foundation in the United States still seems shaky, there is discussion, including on this channel, about the future of what the United States can do, depending upon the 2027 results when we have people sworn in, and 2029 when we have a new presidency sworn in, and Donald Trump is a thing of the past when it comes to the White House. By God, won't that be a beautiful day? But I think that the lack of foundation in the United States, while still there is now a stronger foundation in Europe, that the loss of footing has been regained. And with that footing being regained, with that position being seen as clearly not popular enough to help Orban stay in power, with his framing being shown as weak when it was like, oh, if you don't vote for me, we're going to go to war with Russia. I think all of this came together to convince Fico that the situation when it comes to their relationship with Ukraine probably has to change. He at least has to become more cordial. And when it comes to the Georgians, now that Viktor Orban is gone, and even Fico is saying Ukraine's going to be part of the European Union, they need to think about Ukraine in the context of Ukraine could be in the European Union before the Georgians could be in the European Union. And if that's the case, that means the Ukrainians get veto power in the European Union. And that means you're going to have to start talking to Ukraine as if they are a ascendant EU member state, as the EU accession process now with Orban gone can finally continue. So I think that this is a general temperature shift and an acknowledgement of that. I think this is a sense of the geopolitical shift as more resources are able to come from Europe now over to Ukraine. And I think that shift could soon be extended to the United States, depending upon how the midterms go. But many people do not expect Trump to have a fantastic performance. A survivable performance in the Senate is likely what he can expect, even with the 1 to 2 to 3 seat gain that he is going to make through the gerrymandering process. So there has been a sea change in Europe. I would say things are changing.